So how big a mess is Labour in, and can Keir Starmer pull the party out of it, or is Nigel Farage going to win the next election? Labour peer Lord Glasman, a leading figure in a movement called Blue Labour, which aims to reconnect the party with its working class roots by promoting more culturally conservative policies.
I've spoken a bit about somebody called Maurice Glasman, Lord Maurice Glasman, who was ennobled by Ed Miliband when he was leader of the Labour Party. Maurice Glasman is the founder of something called Blue Labour, and Blue Labour appear to have become very powerful within Keir Starmer's government, mainly because of Morgan McSweeney, Starmer's Dominic Cummings, really, who is one of Maurice Glasman's Blue Labour acolytes. And what they believe in is quite similar to what Nigel Farage believes in, except instead of having capitalism, they're more in favour of a top-down authoritarian militarisation of the country, with corporations running everything. Apparently, Steve Reid, the Environment Secretary, he introduced Keir Starmer to Blue Labour in 2019, and Morgan McSweeney then ran Keir Starmer's leadership election, and obviously he also ran the Labour election in 2024. Morgan McSweeney is credited with winning that election. To be honest, I think the tactical voting won Labour the election. Lots of us were involved in Get the Tories Out, including Carol Vorderman, and it had a lot of traction. And I really think that the tactical vote made a massive difference to Labour, because they were second in most of the seats, and the tactical vote got behind whoever was second in most of those seats. And that's how they won. So I don't think it had anything to do with Morgan McSweeney, because their comms in the last election actually were pretty poor. But he is credited with being a guru, an election guru, and he's got huge amounts of power. And that he is the person that ensured Sue Gray was kicked out of office and blamed for the freebies fiasco, etc. So Maurice Glasman, he believes that welfare makes people soft. So he wants to go back to before the post-war settlement and go back to a sort of survival of the fittest, sort of Victorian type structure, where everyone's wrapped around the flag and has a purpose through building weapons and working in factories. I don't find that very attractive. I don't know about you, but the other extraordinary thing is that, having been a fan of industry, he's not a fan of subsidising farming, which is why farming is under attack by this Labour government. And we're being told by Steve Reid that we need to be profitable, but at the same time they're allowing in lower and lower standard foods, cheaper foods, undercutting British farming. So we can't be profitable because we can't compete with the likes of America and Australia, the massive producers. So none of it really makes any sense, apart from they want to continue to try and make Brexit work, which means an American trade deal. And last week, a statutory instrument was laid down using the Brexit powers, the Henry VIII powers that were gifted to ministers, so that the American deal, which will ensure American beef, a lot of it comes here, which will have a devastating impact on British farming. It also could be beef that's got hormones in it, because we don't actually have a system really that's working to test imports, and America doesn't test anything that goes out. And that in turn could cause huge problems with our existing trade deal with the EU. We could end up in a trade war that could then bring back all of the problems in Northern Ireland. all because Keir Starmer has taken it upon himself to sideline Parliament and not be accountable for a massive decision. This doesn't seem right. From what I understand, this decision is open to being challenged via judicial review, and I'm sure that that is what will happen if Parliament fails to find its strength and challenge the fact that it's been sidelined from making a huge decision around an American trade deal. The other thing to understand about this American trade deal is that in this deal, it agrees to go further. There's going to be more agricultural products coming through from America. So I liken this deal to a shoehorn, really. It's shoehorning in the American trade deal without Parliament's say. That's just not on.
Lord Glasman, if Labour retreats into its comfort zone over welfare, you've said it's destined for the dustbin of history. Just explain what you mean by that.
Well, if it's just going to be about benefits, but that's into a wider... I'm not just part of Blue Labour culturally conservative. We're socialist in economics. We need an industrial strategy. We need to build factories. We need to double the size of the army. We need to restore the integrity and effectiveness of the police. But the fundamental thing, Cathy, is that as the state grows larger, it gets more useless. This is the paradox. We've got to have a really major structural reform of the state. AI here is our friend. A huge amount of administrative jobs are just answering queries. That could be done by AI. So this has got to be, and there's also got to be a restoration of contribution. I mean, there's a huge disaffection with welfare. Not only is the administration useless, but people have really severe doubts about the justice of it. So all of this has got to be addressed.
Well, do you see any appetite within government for the kind of radical policies that you've just set out there a year after they've taken office?
Yeah, increasingly. I mean, don't underestimate the fact that right now it's really a battle on for the direction of this government. And we saw it last week with the student union MPs wetting the bed about a minor decrease in future benefit increases. I mean,
you say minor decrease. A lot of people were saying very loud and very clear that some of the most disadvantaged in society were really going to feel that pain of that £5 billion.
Yeah, but that's the issue. How do we deal with the really disadvantaged in society when, in fact, the greatest beneficiaries are the lanyard class, the actual class that's running the state? So we've got to start looking at that.
Disabled people aren't the lanyard class, are they?
Obviously, total solidarity with disabled people, but there's a caveat there. The definition of disability has got extremely wide, and I don't think any reasonable person can say that there have to be much more stringent checks on that.
Right, so far from paring back the welfare cuts, you would like to see Keir Starmer doubling down, going for what? How many billions more?
Well, the point is we've got to make the space for the new era. This new era is not what progressive New Labour people thought. They thought it was globalisation, they thought it was transferable skills. We're in an era of war, we're in an era of borders, we're in an era of industry, and the resources of the state have got to go into actually building up our industrial productive capacity.
Right.
And just loads of stuff about welfare is really... Our welfare budget is big enough. It's huge.
It's going to be £100 billion by the end of the Parliament.
Yeah, and if you look at the percentage of GDP, it's incredible. So, I mean, I follow Frank Field on this. There's different ways of doing it. There's contributory trusts that can work, but there's got to be greater accountability. This is what the big issue.
So how big a mess is Labour in, and can Keir Starmer pull the party out of it, or is Nigel Farage going to win the next election?
Well, Nigel Farage is nearly 10% ahead now. I spend a lot of time in Grimsby. It's real, it's long-standing. The disaffection of huge swathes, not just the working class of the British people with politics, is bigger now than it's ever been. So in my analysis, the big turning point was the Brexit referendum. That was the shock. You remember, we were all shocked, except I campaigned for it, so I was still shocked because I thought we'd lose, but that's a different story. And what you've seen is the complete destruction of the Conservative Party over this. They came in with Get Brexit Done, they get in with levelling up. They did the opposite, 1 million migrants a year, no levelling up, and they've been consigned to the dustbin of history. If Labour doesn't get with this, Start building factories. Start realising that the greatest thing is not to go to university, but to have a meaningful job.
I'm really sorry, but we're out of time. But
Nigel Farage was the key architect for Brexit and all these wonderful things we were going to get. And we haven't had those wonderful things. Now, we can argue this, that, the other. We were promised a lot and we haven't had that. So I think you have to be very sceptical about people that will promise the world a moon on a stick and then there's no detail of how they can actually...
Britain's food standards have been protected by Europe for many years. But now we are in danger of a flood of American food coming here, which will be horrendous for public health, but also for our food security, our national security. And this is a pivotal issue that we need all patriots to get behind and back our British farmers and our high British standards. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't, and do comment below. Let me know what you think.